They were a formidable team, a partnership surely on its way to the presidency. But right from the beginning of the campaign, they ran into trouble. They would have to use everything they had learned together.
Watch out. You're done.
The McCain campaign came out of the blue at Carl. McCain's outspokenness, his toughness. He didn't like the religious right. He was playing cards that within the Republican constituency would have been fatal to play.
The pro-life group in Washington has turned a cause into a business and are opposed to my trying to clean up campaign finance reform.
But Rove tried to lighten the mood.
Everybody make a snowball, and on the count of 3, throw it.
People think of him as the Darth Vader. Not true at all. He's always smiling. He's the merry prankster.
But it didn't help, and McCain won.
We got our ass kicked. We got humbled. We got put on our knees in the snows, the cold snows of New Hampshire.
I knew we were going to lose. I just didn't know it was by 19 points. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
But Rove mocked McCain's victory.
Yeah, just like Pat Buchanan was the nominee in '96. He won. What did he do in Iowa? He came in 5th behind Gary Bauer, Alan Keyes, and Steve Forbes, and barely ahead of Orrin Hatch. In your perverted little mind.
The next primary was South Carolina, and they played really hard.
We got tougher, and we got focused, and we learned how to win.
George Bush understood that he had to win South Carolina, but Rove understood it in a way that I think even Bush did not. It was important that he attack John McCain.
Rove's campaign went straight at McCain, but another, darker, unofficial campaign would unfold.
It was an ugly campaign in the undercurrents. There was an underground campaign in South Carolina that was thoroughly ugly.
They went right at McCain's strength, his image as a hero of the Vietnam War. This Vietnam vet said McCain was not supportive of veterans.
We're familiar, for instance, with certain senator.
It put us on our heels.
Opposed all the legislation, be it Agent Orange.
You looked at this charge on its face, and it was pretty spurious. I mean, who would ever think, really, that John McCain had been bad to veterans on his return from Vietnam?
That fringe veteran said that John McCain had abandoned the veterans. Now, I don't know if you can understand this, George, but that really hurts.
Yeah.
You should be ashamed.
Yeah, let me speak.
You should be ashamed.
I can't say that Carl specifically engineered it, but McCain blew up. He lost his cool.
Well, let him respond on that point.
You should be ashamed.
Let me finish.
You had to believe that, at the very least, Bush people were aware of what was going on.
And the attacks intensified.
There were whisper campaigns on top of whisper campaigns, on top of phone campaigns, on top of media campaigns, on top of email campaigns, that it became so abundant that there was no traditional way to sort of deal with that.
Hey, listen, politics is a tough sport, and there's no tougher than South Carolina in America.
My friends, we can build a party. The party of Theodore Roosevelt. The party
And
of
then,
Ronald Reagan.
shades of the Ann Richards race in Texas, the gay issue.
Then what you saw on some doorsteps was this flyer. John McCain was shaking the hands of a member of the log cabin Republicans. These were gay Republicans. Political dynamite in a place like South Carolina.
Nobody in the Bush campaign or anybody associated with us, with all these allegations of things that they've said that we did and rumors that we started, nobody anywhere in our world that we were associated with did any of that. Now, were there people out there saying outrageous things? Yeah, like any political campaign. But in the end, I think South Carolina Republicans decided that George Bush was somebody that better represented the party than Senator McCain.
George W. Bush won that contest by 11 percentage points. They had vanquished McCain, and they set a new tone for hard presidential campaigning. It ended in Florida. When they got to the White House, Rove immediately set in motion the campaign for 2004.
Much harder to run a re-election campaign than an election campaign.
Why?
In an election campaign, you're independent. In a re-election campaign, you're serving the White House, a whole other organization, a whole other entity. If there's bad news every morning, or some mornings, you own the bad news. And obviously, we had some difficult headlines in 03 and 04.
An orgy of bad news from Iraq.
After that successful midterm election, the president's popularity began to fall.
So the economy created 50,000 fewer jobs.
There was an unsteady economy.
Light crude hit a price of $45.
And the war in Iraq.
The abuse scandal continues to whip up Iraqi anger.
But Rove and his team thought Bush's decisiveness in the war on terror would prevail over John Kerry.
I'm John Kerry, and I'm reporting for duty.
By the time John Kerry was nominated, Rove's team had branded him as a flip-flopper, a theme they had been pounding for months.
As soon as he got the nomination, they had this template. John Kerry says one thing, does another, and they could fit all of their attacks in it.
Here's how it worked. The issue was Kerry's no vote, and then what Rove's team called Kerry's flip-flop on the $87 billion appropriation for the war in Iraq.
We discovered that John Kerry is going to talk to a group of veterans in West Virginia. We say, let's create an ad instantly.
Body armor for troops in combat.
Mr. Kerry.
No. Higher combat pay.
Mr. Kerry.
No.
When he lands, all the reporters and everybody's talking about this ad about him voting against the appropriation.
Wrong on defense.
So what happens is Kerry gets in front of the group, the veterans group, and defends himself against the ad.
I understand the Republican attack machine has welcomed me to West Virginia today with another distortion and misleading.
Which created the most iconic moment of the campaign, which is when he said to this group, before I voted against it, I actually voted for the $87 billion. And then we were up at the campaign and we were watching it live and we said, we got him. We got him. And we immediately recut the ad with that piece of his video in front of the veterans to close the ad and put it up.
Mr. Kerry.
No. And what does Kerry say now?
I actually did vote for the $87 billion before I voted against it.
Wrong on defense.
And then they borrowed from a familiar playbook.
The number one thing that John Kerry offered was his heroic service in Vietnam. And so what Rove did was attack the strength of Kerry, not his weakness.
Why have you repeatedly claimed you were illegally sent?
The first attack on Kerry's Vietnam service came from outside of the campaign.
How could you accuse us of being war criminals and secretly meet with the enemy?
A series of television ads made with Vietnam veterans, produced by a group known as a 527, that was by law independent of Rove's campaign.
How can you expect our sons and daughters to follow you when you condemned their fathers and grandfathers?
I literally saw the Swift Boat ad online, and I run over to Matthew and Carl and say, the first thing I do is go, have you seen this? This is this thing is going to have a big impact.
The Swift Boat Veterans for Truth were run in part out of a lobbying shop, DCI group here in Washington that has had close ties to the Bush organization over the years. And one of the people who has been a principal in that, Tony Feather, was the political chief in the 2000 campaign, and in this last campaign he was running much of the direct mail.
I'm against all the 527 ads and activities. I don't think they're fair. I don't think
Rove publicly disavowed the 527s, but took the opportunity to spread the message anyway.
But I understand why some people who were in Vietnam feel very strongly about what Senator Kerry did and said when he came back.
Kerry's poll numbers were static. They had kept him from any post-convention bounce. Bush was holding his own. But to make sure, there was always one other card to play: the gay issue.
It especially appealed to the small segment of voters who Carl was trying to mobilize and really excite. Not just, turn out, but excite. Because if they were excited about the election, they were more likely to turn out to vote.
Bush and Rove had decided to harden the base by supporting state ballot measures banning gay marriage.
I think the gay issue is a very effective issue, and I think Carl keeps a watchdog eye on all that echo effect And insofar as he can influence it to the advantage of the administration, he does so.
The measures, certain to bring social conservative voters to the polls, would be voted on in 11 states. One of them, the key battleground state of Ohio. And Bush and Rove went one step further.
If we're to prevent the meaning of marriage from being changed forever, our nation must enact a constitutional amendment to protect marriage in America.
Back in 2000, George W. Bush had courted the support of Republican gays and lesbians.
I helped organize a group of gay Republicans, gay and lesbian Republicans, that went to Austin, and it became known as the Austin 12.
Washington, D.C. Councilmember David Catania supported Bush's candidacy then.
As far as individuals under 40, I was one of the president's largest fundraisers. You know, we have a fabulous picture with the president and first lady and the two of us, and they've got their arms around us like a man overboard to a life vest. And I stopped raising money after the president made noise of a constitutional amendment. The first time he mentioned it, I shut it down because I wasn't going to be a party to it. I felt, what a betrayal.
The gay issue. Carl has used it for more than a decade in a very effective way. And there's something of an hypocrisy, it seems to me, because many people who are Republican operatives who are helping implement this exact attack on the issue of gay rights are themselves gay.
There are openly gays within the party, within elected officials and the administration that are gay, and how does Rove deal with them? So long as people don't make an issue, so long as people are lulled into a confidence that they are in fact second class and act accordingly, there's no problem. You do not find, though, individuals, openly gay individuals, that challenge Karl Rove. That doesn't exist.
But Rove's attention was focused on the base, and now he had what he needed to win, an army of Christian foot soldiers.
I don't think we can overstate this mobilization of the individual churches. Never happened before. Vast, sort of untapped source of political energy in this country. The evangelicals didn't just come out and vote for him. They were his campaign. They were at the events. They were the poll volunteers. They were making the phone banks, the phone calls. That's how you win elections.
And on election day, when those exit polls seemed to show John Kerry would win the presidency, there were thousands of Republican volunteers across the country in key precincts reporting back to the Republican war room. That's how Karl Rove knew that his social conservative base was turning out, and that his 30-year quest was successful.
I want to thank my superb campaign team. I want to thank the architect, Karl Rove.
Right after the election, the architect said that he had just run his last presidential campaign.
This is where Rove is at his best. So Rove doesn't have to worry about Bush. Rove has enough money to live on. He doesn't need to be a consultant. He can now go for the history books, which is, I'm sure, what he's going for. So he's going to try to do his absolute best.
Karl Rove was given a new office just steps away from the president. He'd given him a new title, Deputy Chief of Staff. It gave Karl Rove a formal position at the elbow of the president, and the opportunity for them together to reach back through Reagan and Goldwater to the idea of rearranging the American political landscape.
I think what they're trying to do is bigger than the Great Society and approaches the New Deal. They aren't kidding around.
To Bush and Rove, the victory proved they, and not the Democrats, knew where the country was. And that empowered Bush to take on the big issue that he had long wanted to address: Social Security.
It fits into Bush's desire to be bold. It fits into the Bush administration's and Karl Rove's desire to move the politics of the country toward the Republican Party by going after workers under 45 with a personal account that they think will lock those voters closer to the Republican Party over time. And it is something in Bush's idea of, being a consequential president.
To accomplish their goals, Rove's highly developed campaign methods and machine were ready and waiting.
The best way to keep the political machine of 2004, the get out the vote effort, together and healthy for 2008 is to use it during the next 4 years to campaign for tort reform and tax reduction and Social Security.
In February of 2005, as the president headed for Capitol Hill to deliver the State of the Union speech, he took a broad vision of a nation unfettered by the constraints of government. He was armed with Rove's method, polling data, anger points.
The idea of Social Security collapsing before they retire does not seem like a small matter.
And a willingness to challenge Congress.
And it should not be a small matter to the United States Congress.
He's not there simply to make Social Security solvent. He's there to change it in a way that fits into his philosophy of government, which is to give people more control over their own money or their own lives or their own destiny.
Then, in classic Rove fashion, the next morning, a 5-state blitz.
It sends a message the president is going to play political hardball on Social Security from day one.
Rove used the base to turn out crowds at hand-picked town meetings.
I like the idea of you owning something. I love an ownership society.
They focused on Rove's issue points: ownership society and private, personal accounts.
We want people owning and managing their own health care accounts, and I think it makes sense to have people owning and managing their own retirement accounts.
This campaign, the stakes couldn't be higher.
There is not a crisis in Social Security.
Bush and Rove are going against fierce opposition,
I feel very strongly,
even from some conservatives.
There's a lot of skepticism of the president's plan because
it's not clear their Social Security proposal will fly anytime soon.
There is no plan.
And those promises to their religious base make many Republicans uncomfortable.
And that's what most people, I believe in.
But they have a broader agenda on the domestic front, and even more ambitious plans for the U.S. in the world, bringing Iraq to a favorable conclusion and encouraging democracy around the globe.
The danger for the Republicans is the same danger that any winning party has, to overinterpret any election as a mandate to essentially do what they want to do. So if the Republicans overreach, there could be a backlash against the Republicans that would first be felt in 2006 and certainly could be felt in the 2008 presidential election.
Karl Rove is a student of history. He knows that politics is not static, that it goes in cycles, and that real change takes time. And that architects have dreams and plans that don't always get built. But sometimes they do.
Visit Frontline's website for more on this report, including background on Karl Rove's life and career, a closer look at Rove's role in the Republican realignment in Texas, and how it became the template for what he would later accomplish nationally.
Our goal is to raise X.
Extended interviews with members of the Bush-Cheney re-election team.
Did we meet our goal today?
And Washington Post reporters.
Make somebody angry.
More on the tension between conservative and moderate Republicans over the party's future, plus a teacher's guide, streaming video of the full program, and more. Then join the discussion at pbs.org.
Next time on Frontline, 25 years ago, as America was at another crossroads in the Middle East, PBS broadcast perhaps the most controversial program in its history. An investigation into why a young Saudi Arabian princess was publicly executed for adultery.
She could be any Arab girl in any Arab country.
Don't miss Death of a Princess. Watch Frontline.
To order Frontline's Karl Rove, The Architect, on video cassette or DVD, call PBS Home Video at 1-800-PLAY-PBS.
is made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.